An Affliction of the Heart by Anonymous Pegasus. Chapter 2. Collared. Kuno awoke in the room. The wooden ceiling was the first thing she saw. Her head was still buzzing from the magic depressant, and she felt groggy and listless. The changeling rolled off the bed with a low groan, landing shakily on her hooves and then shaking her head a few times to try and clear it. Her room had a new addition, a chair and a desk, with a hoofful of books spread across it. Kuno made her way over to the desk, pushing the books around to glance at their titles. There were adventure novels, romance novels, fiction and non-fiction, all different kinds of books. Daring do was a reoccurring theme. It was utterly bizarre. Kuno didn't know what to make of it. A simple royal guard had taken her into custody and was apparently keeping her at his own house. These were not normal cell furnishings, she was sure. She had spent as much time as possible as far away from jail cells as she could, but a wooden room with a newly installed one-way window, a view to a garden, and a collar, these were not normal imprisonment conditions. And it would take a unicorn to install the one-way window. That much Kuno knew. So Warden had gone through all the trouble of making up this room to keep her contained. If the royal guard at large knew of her position and her existence, then she was certain she would have been taken to the Canterlot Palace for public execution, or banished from Equestria at the very least. And yet here she was. If Warden was alone her jailer, then he would have to contract some pony out to make the one-way window. It was a lot of trouble to go through to keep a single changeling contained. And now there were these books for her to amuse herself with, as though Warden was concerned about her mental well-being as well. Her ruminations were interrupted by the appearance of a shadow at her feet, and before the touch came at her shoulder, she knew it was coming. A notepad was thrust under her nose. "I am leaving for the day. Do not try to escape." Kuno pondered on suggesting that the guard just make "do not try to escape" the header of all the notes. But under that was another sentence. "You will be allowed to use the rooms while I am away. Is there anything special you need?" Kuno blinked at that, looking up at the guard.
Special?
The guard nodded once.
As in... dietary?
The changeling queried, confused. A tentative nod was her answer. Kuno gave a derisive laugh.
You could start by finding me a willing pony to take love from. Other than that, no. I will slowly waste away and die no matter what you feed me. You could get me a better color, though. One with a bell.
The guard looked up at her and down, his expression clearly confused, wondering if she was being sarcastic or truthful, before he bowed-faced and walked away. Kuno took a few steps forward and laid her hoof on the door in the room, to hear it vibrate, clicking locked. The changeling rolled over onto her back, wiggling slightly and splaying her wings out. She calmed her breathing, and then closed her eyes, concentrating. It was odd not being able to hear anything, but she could feel the vibrations of the guard's hoofbeats against the wooden floor through her sensitive wing membranes. She heard him walk down the hallway, pause, and then come back. By the time the door opened, Kuno had rolled back onto her stomach and was looking up at the guard expectantly. The hoof that was not holding his spear held the tether outstretched. Kuno gave a long-suffering sigh and reached up to her throat, finding the padlock there was open. She stepped closer to the guard, cooperating, allowing the tether to be clipped into place. The guard snapped the padlock shut, and then held the other end of the tether. She was led out the hall, trailing behind the warden. He ambled up to a post near the bathroom, and then hooked her tether to the iron ring. And then Warden carefully walked past her, sliding his helmet on and walking out the front door. Kuno very quickly discovered that Warden was meticulous in his preparation. Whether her tether just outside the bathroom, she could just reach the facilities in the bathroom itself, some of the kitchen, and the table at which they had eaten dinner. And if she stretched as far as she could just touch one of the windows with a hoof. The drawers in the kitchen had been emptied. The cupboards in the bathroom were bare, except for a vial containing magic suppressant pills, some kind of sadistic joke. And everything else that could be fashioned into a weapon or perhaps some kind of tool to free herself had been removed. So instead, Kuno did the only thing a changeling in her position could possibly do. She ran a hot bath and lazed around in it with a half of a magic suppression tablet to take the edge off her pain. While indulging in her amphibious side, Kuno tried the soap, scrubbing it across her form and then vigorously rubbing it at her chin to make sure the scent was removed. After that, it was just lazing. The half-tablet she took had mulled her senses, and dulled the pain that had been building in the base of her wings behind her eyes. Time was meaningless like that, and before she knew it, the flat of a spear was waking her up. Kuno's eyes fluttered open, and she was blinked up at the warden, giving a grunt of acknowledgement. Awkwardly, she slipped and slid to her hooves, the water slippery with the soap in it. A steadying hoof from the warden helped her crawl free from the tub, and then a towel was thrown over her shoulders. Some vigorous rubbing across her form got her dry, and she was pleased to find that the towel came away clean, with just the faintest hint of brown at the edges. Warden was still watching her from the doorway. He waited for her to be done, then laid her to the table. Once more, she was given bread and stew, a rather bland meal. Kuno sat at the side of the table, chewing on her bread and stew glumly. The tether was just far enough away that she had to lift the center of it off the floor, and was putting a constant slight pressure on her collar that was infuriating. Every little sway and jolt of the tether she could feel quite actually as a tug or pull on her collar. Kuno finished her meal first, and then sat there, watching Warden as he finished his own.
So, why are you keeping me here?
Kuno asked the guard. His ears perked upwards, and he gave her an uncomfortable look before returning to his meal.
You know, the silent treatment won't work very well since I can't hear shit anyhow,
Kuno stated, chasing a crumb across her plate. Warren looked up at her again, and pursed his lips. He paused his eating, and then pushed away from the table, coming back with the notepad in his hoof again. He scrawled something across it, and then pushed it under her nose. Found you in the field.
No, really?
Kuno asked in a sarcastically odd tone. The Pegasus frowned, and then wrote something else down. You're a changeling.
Your powers of deduction are astounding,
Kuno said, with a shake of her head. Couldn't leave you in the field.
Well, that was understandable,
Kuno admitted, tapping her hoof against her chin, and then waving that same hoof at the house.
But then this isn't a jail, not a proper one. You're the only one guarding me, and this,
she plucked at her collar,
is not splendid prison attire. Why are you keeping me a secret from the rest of the guards?
Warden looked dismayed at that, at how easily the changeling could put two and two together. There was a long pause, and he hesitated over each word as he wrote out a short sentence. They'll kill you. Kuno nodded at this.
Most likely, yes.
Can't let them.
Sure you can,
Kuno stated with a hoof.
It'd be easy, in fact.
The thud of the Pegasus' hooves against the table made no sound to Kuno, but she felt the impact in her bones. The Pegasus scowled at her deeply. His eyes narrowed.
Are you really that concerned about me?
Kuno asked glumly.
I'm just a changeling. Surely your conscience could be able to do a single changeling dying.
Warren frowned deeply at her, and then shook his head, scrawling a single word across the notepad and tossing it across his shoulder. Can't. Kuno peered at the single word on the paper, frowning to herself.
So you're just going to keep me here, forever? You realize that you're killing me as surely as if you would turn me into the other guards?
The Pegasus returned to his seat, and began to finish his meal. He gave her a curt nod, looking unhappy.
So, let me go!
Kuno said. An emphatic shake of the Pegasus' head was her only answer. Kuno growled, pushing the table with her hooves, and turning her head back, effectively ending her conversation. There were several long minutes before she felt a tap on her shoulder, and she turned towards him, narrowing her eyes.
Murderer.
The Pegasus pursed his lips, and shook the end of the tether in her face, motioning towards the room. Kuno sighed, then dropped down off the chair, stalking into her room and splaying herself out on the bed, huffing and closing her eyes. There was a tugging at her collar, and it was removed completely. Something thudded down the bed beside her, and then she felt the concussion of the door as the room closing. After a few moments, Kuno opened her eyes to find a new collar sitting on her bed. A cute red collar, with a bell on it. The changeling sighed faintly, scooping up the collar closer to herself and batting at the bell in a depressed way. She couldn't hear it jingling. It took her only a few moments to get the collar on, to fasten it into place. There was no padlock on it, but she guessed that Warren could add one the next time that she was taken out of the room. Kuno sighed and pulled herself over the desk, selecting a book and beginning to flick through it, batting at her new bell in a glum way. At least now she had an indicator of how her hearing was returning, if it would ever return. Not that it would matter if she didn't find a way out of there. In a week, maybe more if she continued to get regular meals, she would be dead.